Hi, my name is Gustavo. I work in the field of risks, particularly industrial process risks. There are different methodologies to determine the risk related to an industrial process. I'm interested in one of these methodologies called HAZOP, Hazard and Operability Analysis. The HAZOP uses team working. As a consultant, I lead the meetings where we try to find and characterize risks. I have a degree in engineering and another in social psychology. In Argentina, the social psychology has its main focus on working with groups, so I have the theoretical background to do this work as a technician and also as a group leader. During the meeting, there are a lot of problems that I have to solve using engineering. These are the technical issues related with the recognition of process hazard, and there are other situations that arise in the meetings related with the group dynamic. Who is a positive leader, the negative leader, who wants to disrupt the meeting, and other roles that the social psychology helps me to treat. As I mentioned, I am interested in industrial risks, and we use a very simple formula to calculate the risk associated with the industrial processes. Risk is equal to consequence multiplied by frequency of occurrence. So we have to define scenarios where there are causes that produce risky events, and we have to characterize it, compare the scenario's risk with the risk level that the company tolerates. This risk is related to the probability, measuring the frequency of occurrence, that an event produces a certain consequence. Let me clarify this with an example. In Argentina, we have 8,000 deaths in traffic accidents every year. So we can say that we have a consequence of one death with a frequency of approximately 1 each hour. If you have another process with the same rate of use, let me say traveling in trains, we can calculate the risk associated with this process, and we can find which of the two is more risky. First of all, we have to determine if the risks are tolerable. Then we can give an order where to put the effort and money to maintain the risk below the value that is tolerated by the company. In this case, 8,000 deaths is the value that Argentinian society tolerates, but it is too high, so we would think solution to this problem. Continuing with example, this risk is something that everyone tolerates and contributes to this record, but not in a conscious manner. These things happen to human beings without having conscious of it. In the HAZOP group meetings, it's very common that there is a lack of information related with risks, and we will fill the gaps with fast, automatic, instinctive, emotional, and stereotypical thinking instead of slow, effortful, deliberative, analytic, and logical thinking. During the meetings, my studies and experience with risk perception allowed me to avoid some of the different biases the participants have, but during the course I could put a name to a lot of them and find ways to avoid the bad impact some of the comments have in the group and as a result of this in the risk analysis. In the following minutes I will try to use different aspects of the way we think and how this impact in the results of the meetings. During the meeting, for example, there would be a person that from the beginning is trying to impose his beliefs. This is very important, that what a person tries to impose is what he or she believes, saying that his experience support what he is saying. There is no room to discussion. This kind of position is a good example of what representativeness bias is. His or her experience is more valid than the statistics of the general industry, and this figure should be taken into account instead of the one that is typical of the industry. I have to be very cautious to explain that what is happening is an interpretation and that there are other ways that this event could have been interpreted. Perhaps knowing the name of this bias, the fundamental cognitive error, is something that gives me another tool to improve the efficiency of the meetings. Another thing I learned not directly from the course, but from Kahneman's book. You introduced me to Danny Kahneman, so you have the merits. Is that when someone put a number on the table, it's very important to discuss not the number, but the position that the person is assuming. Kahneman explained in his book this topic in negotiation, when someone begins with a very high or low number. The problem with the number is that the other numbers anchor this number on this number. It doesn't matter if it is real, big or small, biasing the results. Another very important bias is availability. If the person in the company where I work in had an accident in the near past, the frequency they want to use for the consequence is very high. The contrary is valid as well. If they don't have accidents, it's very difficult to put the correct frequency. They try to use a low frequency of occurrence. Okay, I learned that I have to invest more time in the beginning of the meeting to induce the people to think profoundly about the hazard they have in their processes. This is a very important discussion, and now I know that what I have to do is to put the discussion in the system to arena instead of beginning to work directly in the systems one's field. Using this methodology, once we have the consequences, we have to find ways to improve the safety for the process. For this, it's very important to have very clear what are the causes. For example, many times the risks arise as a result of an operator's error. But these kind of errors are not always a fault of the person, but of the structure where this person belongs. The fundamental attribution error is the tendency to underestimate the impact of the situation. So many times the way to reduce the frequency of occurrence of an event is not paying attention to the person that made the mistake, but to the situation. This change is fundamental in the risk analysis, and for me it's very important to know that it's not something isolated, but a kind of reasoning that is typical from human beings. Finally, I want to put emphasis in one of the most important concepts I have been working these years, regarding risk, of course. You see what you believe. This concept also appears along the course, so I put it in the top of the concerns every hazard meeting I conduct. Too many times we see things where there is nothing, and too many times too we do not see things where there are very dangerous ones. Not seeing a hazard would be very dangerous. Okay, well, for the end, I want to read a story, The Emperor's New Clothes, a short tale by Hans Christian Andersen. A vain emperor who cares about nothing except wearing and displaying clothes hires two swindlers who promise him the finest, best suit of clothes from a fabric invisible to anyone who is unfit for his position or hopelessly stupid. The emperor's ministers cannot see the clothing themselves, but pretend that they can for fear of appearing unfit for their position, and the emperor does the same. Finally, the swindlers report that the suit is finished. They mime, dressing him, and the emperor marches in procession before his subjects. The townsfolk play along with the pretense, not wanting to appear unfit for their position or stupid. Then a child in the crowd, too young to understand the desirability of keeping up the pretense, blurts out that the emperor is wearing nothing at all, and the cry is taken up by others. The emperor cringes, suspecting the assertion is true, but continues the procession. Thanks a lot. I'm Gustavo Sales Piel, and I think about risk perception.